Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. My name is Alex Pelswitz. Welcome to my kitchen. I'm from the Upper Peninsula and I work for Taste the Local Difference. And tonight I'm going to be going through some recipes with you. But before we get started, I just wanted to talk about how cool my job is and how cool of an opportunity that this is. So I get to work with chefs and farmers in the community. And so not only today am I talking about kind of cooking skills, but we're also going to be talking about how important it is to kind of eat locally, and I'll be talking about how you can get some of the ingredients that I'll be using from different local producers. But first, I want to introduce Haley. Haley is with MARESA, so the Marquette Alger Regional Education Service Agency, who made this possible for y'all today. So I just wanted to thank Haley for joining. She'll be answering questions. And Haley, is there anything you wanted to say?
I just want to say thanks for watching, anyone that's watching out there. We were lucky enough to help Alex out or not help her out, but have her offer this amazing class through some funding from the Michigan Health Endowment Fund. So we're really excited and hoping to enjoy this class. So yeah,
All
thanks,
right.
Alex.
Well, thank you, Haley, for being here. Haley will, if there are any questions, you can use, if you look at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you can use the question and answer. That way we can kind of answer those questions, or you can just type them in the chat box. And if you're visiting us from somewhere and you want to share what county you're from, you're also welcome to share that. And then just a reminder, we're going to record this and put this on YouTube so you can watch it later and always cook along. But right now, you're welcome to just kind of sit back and relax and watch me kind of talk through these next recipes. So before I kind of switch to the fun view, which is you get to see me work, I just want to talk about where you can get all of these. So we're using, it's probably going to look backwards to you, but the Good and Cheap Cookbook. It's by Leanne Brown. And I really like using this cookbook because you can get the recipes online for free. I'm just gonna spotlight my video here. So you can use this PDF, go online, and you can see all the recipes, and it's really great as a book to have though. And I really like it because there's not just great recipes, but they're really simple. There's a few ingredients in them, not super expansive, as well as it talks about how to eat seasonally, and I think that's really important for local eating as well. So that being said, the cookbook, is really great, but I always adapt my recipes sometimes. So at the end of today, I will share as well a link to the adapted versions of the recipes that I used. Nothing big, just using apples instead of peaches, and kind of change up some of the meats that I'm using today. So you're like, wait, what are you making? So we're going to be focusing on 2 recipes. Today we're going to talk about some great recipes that are great for the holiday, as well as great for gift giving. So I'm going to be doing an apple coffee cake, as well as a kind of Michigan black bean ragu. And the reason I kind of chose these for the holiday season is I think the coffee cake is kind of a great gift that you could make for someone and share it. It's a really simple, approachable cake. It's a good thing to have around for, you and your family to enjoy on the holiday. And then the reason I chose the ragu is because it's so flexible. So when I'm thinking holiday cooking this year, I'm thinking, taking the couple weeks we're going to have off and really spending time with each other, and eating some different meals. So not just those big traditional meals that we might have been used to before. I think taking the time that we have to get to know ourselves in the kitchen a little bit more. And I think it's really important, when it comes to cooking, that we remember that it's the more we know about cooking, the more understanding we have about food. That's really cool. It's powerful, right? Like, so as a kid, the more that you know how to cook your own food, the more that you're going to be able to know what you do and don't like, or how you like things. So for me, getting to know more about cooking and getting more comfortable in the kitchen also helped me better understand how I like to eat. But that being said, oh, and I don't know if I mentioned, but I also like the ragu too, because it's something that you can easily freeze. And so I'm actually planning to make this recipe and freeze it and give it to some of my family members as gifts this year, and kind of just let them have a gift of something delicious and take a little extra time off their hands. So the ragu is great for things like burritos or nachos, or you can put it over pasta, which I'm gonna do tonight. But let me get started. So I'm going to change up my view. And Haley, at this point, it's a little hard for me to see what's going on the screen. So just speak up if there's any questions that you have. But otherwise, I'm just gonna dive right in.
Sounds good.
All right, so first up, I'm gonna get started with this apple coffee cake here. And I'm actually gonna remove a couple things just to make it a little less busy here. So the first, I wanna show kind of all the different ingredients I have ready. So I got stuff in the correct kind of bowls to make sure that this is a nice, easy, organized process. So looking at the first step of the recipe, you want to butter your dish that you're going to use. In the recipe, they talk about an 11.5 or an 8 by 11 kind of square glass bin, but they also talk about how you can use a round dish. I'm using my cast iron just because it's the best size. And Leanne talks about in the recipe how that's the biggest, is making sure that you have a proper size, because this is a cake that has some baking powder, so it's gonna rise. So just in making sure that everything's gonna fit is the biggest thing. When I use my cast iron for something like this, I also want to remember that it's really thick, especially compared to a traditional, I don't know if you can kind of see, but it's nice and sturdy, right? So compared to a sheet, more of a tin pan, it's gonna cook a lot. It's gonna need to cook a little longer. So keep that in mind. So I've already buttered that. And then the next piece is going to be prepping the apples, which I've already done here. So the reason I actually chose this recipe is because I had tons of apples. They're all local apples, which I got at a grocery store in the area, and they didn't look really great. So I peeled them, and just, as you can see, like some of the skin still on. It's not a big deal if the skin makes it in there. I just didn't want the peels on because, like I said, they were kind of bruised, had some spots on them, so I wanted to get most of the peel off. I am going to be slicing this more pretty apple to make it look really nice on the top. But in the recipe, the main thing that you do with the apples is you toss them in lemon juice as well as some cinnamon. So I've cut these up, made sure I got the core and the seeds out, which I'll show you a little bit more in a second. And then I toss them in lemon juice, which I have in this bottle here. So we're gonna set those apples there. And then as far as the rest of my ingredients that are ready, I've got just a bowl here. This is flour and baking powder. As far as flour, so one of the things I wanted to talk about today is using local ingredients. So I want to take a second and show the flour that we're using. So this is Freedom Mills flour. So this is a UP grown and milled flour. I really love it. So let's go back to this view. It's probably going to be a little hard for you to see, but it's got a really wonderful texture and it tastes really good. I think there's a lot more flavor to it. So this is the whole wheat version, but I've actually already made this recipe once before. And as far as the way that it reacts to it works. So you can totally sub out a whole wheat flour or a local flour for this recipe. So that's in there as well as the baking powder. So you can kind of see a theme, right? Like I'm getting all of my ingredients organized based on kind of reading the recipe ahead of time and knowing, seeing what they put in different bowls. So another thing that they have you mix is you're going to be mixing brown sugar with butter. And again, the recipe is going to have all these amounts and everything for you. We're just kind of here to talk about techniques. So you'll see in a lot of baking that butter and sugar often really go together. And it's hard to think about, but like the sugar actually kind of melts into the butter. And, if I was teaching this class in person, I'd be like, well, what is butter? And everyone would be like, they'd already know the answer, right? And you'd be like, it's fat. So that's what's happening. This fat, which is butter, is going to help dissolve the sugar. There's some salt in the recipe, just a little bit. So I just put that in there too. And so that's going to be one of our steps. And then there are also the last couple ingredients that I haven't mentioned. They use vanilla or vanilla extract. I'm all out of that right now. So this is actually a little bit of plum syrup that's really, really concentrated that I'm gonna add just to kind of give it a little bit of sweetness. And then we also are gonna need a couple eggs. And we're also, like I said, I talk about local eggs. When you think about the quality of an egg and the deliciousness of an egg, I think it's a really good option. And there's so many places around the UP where you can access local eggs. It could just be your neighbor. So if you can use local eggs, I really suggest going for those. And though I did, so going with the recipe, the first part is you want to make sure your butter is like room temp. I made sure it was extra room temp. I can even stir it. So the first step is to mix in this sugar into the butter, and we're going to want it to kind of melt into it. All right, so this part is going to be honestly the longest part, so I'm going to change it up for just a couple seconds here so you can be with me. So like I said, you want it to be kind of fluffy and you want that sugar to be really incorporated. So I got to put a little bit of arm work. Like I said, this might be the most intense step, except for maybe cutting and peeling the apples. Now, I just showed you all of my organization, right? I kind of timed myself before, and about 15 minutes to get everything separated and kind of prepped and ready. And that in culinary terms is called mise en place. So mise en place is French, and it means everything in place. So part of what we wanted to focus on tonight was cooking with kids, right? So I think this recipe in particular, I think really works for younger kids. They can help measure things out. A lot of it is based on cups. Maybe they can help with putting the apples in, as you see when we start assembling it. And I think that organization piece that I just showed, having stuff in different bowls, is a really fun thing. So in the recipe that I'll share, it kind of breaks it down on those different tasks that kids can help with, like separating things into different bowls. And I think this part, right, the mixing part. So again, now the rest should be moving pretty quickly. So here we've got, this is our butter and our sugar, and it's got a little bit of salt in there, and that has been all mixed. So the next piece that we want to add is, this is the flour and the baking powder. So we're going to add that in. I'm going to start with like a little bit less than half, and just want to mix it and incorporate it. So I actually made this recipe this weekend, and it's super delicious. I will report back. I actually made it with Asian pears. I may even have it, it's kind of messy looking. So I totally didn't like follow the recipe when I first made it. I thought, oh, I know how this goes. So I guess the joke of that is to, of course, always follow the recipe, because it definitely isn't super pretty. But that being said, it definitely tastes delicious. So the thing that I messed up on before was I didn't mix the sugar with the butter first, so it didn't fully melt. And then I also read in the recipe, she talks about how this batter is going to be really thick. And when I made it myself, I didn't trust how thick it was, and actually added a little bit of milk, which I didn't need to do, and I think definitely affected my final product the first time. So know that this batter is going to feel thick, and that's totally okay. All right, so we're going to make that. So I don't know if you can quite see, but you see how the sides, you know, there's some dry stuff. That's really important. You're going to want to take your time right now to scrape down the sides and get all of those dry pieces of this recipe incorporated. Okay, so the next part you do is you're going to be adding your egg. They say to add 1 egg at a time. So I'm going to add 1 egg and mix that in. And then once you get this batter made, it's just going to be layering this in your pan. And then one piece that I would get done, of course, ahead of time as well is going to be preheating your oven. So my oven is set at 350. So that'll be ready as soon as this mixture is set. I'm gonna put it right in the oven. So you can see, I mean, I've added both the eggs and it is pretty thick, like it's a definitely thick batter. It's not like a traditional cake batter. Now, all right, the last ingredient that I have is my, this would be a vanilla extract if you had it, but I don't have that. So it's just a little bit of plum syrup, which is super concentrated plum juice. I got those plums from downstate. I love going to fruit stands in the summer, and so I get lots of fruit, and then I cut them up and put them in my freezer. So in the winter time, I get to taste the taste of summer. All right, so although it's pretty thick still, you can see it's definitely kind of a batter. So we're all set to assemble. Get this a little closer here so you can see it. So I've already put butter in my pan. So in the recipe, they put down half of the mixture at first to get started. So this is, if you have kids or if you're a kid watching, this is definitely the fun part, getting to assemble. So I'm just kind of making sure that the batter goes across the whole thing. I want a nice base. All right, so definitely doesn't matter what age you are. This is a piece that you can help out with. Now I'm gonna be going pretty quick right now because I wanna get moving on to our next recipe. I think getting your hands involved in cooking is really important. Getting a nice kind of thick, even layer here. And we do want to reserve what's left there. I'm going to show you how I'm going to make the top really pretty. All right, so we're going to get the rest of our mixture for our apple coffee cake. Like I said, it's going to bake and it's going to rise because you've got that baking powder. You're seeing me, don't worry, I washed my hands before I got started. Something I want to always do before I get in the kitchen. You know, when you saw me before, you saw my hair was back. I have my apron on. I'm not saying it always has to be official, but you always want to cook safe and when you're in the kitchen, and make sure you're always washing your hands. All right. I'm going to make mine a little different with the apple, right? Also, I wanted to take a moment, like just talking about a quick, easy way to cut an apple. So I'm going to cut it in half. And when you cut your apples, you don't want the core, right? So once you've cut it in half, I'm going to cut it in a quarter again. And then, you want to make sure you're holding your knife safely, which you're going to see a little bit when I go into onions in just a second here. But go like this, and then I'm just going to cut at an angle and take off that core part. So I'm going to do me, so grabbing the thumb and my forefinger, wrapping my hand around. That one's done. There we go. So just doing some quick slices. All right, and then once these are cut, I'm going to toss those in the remaining lemon juice and cinnamon that I kind of had from those other apples. And we're just going to layer those really pretty on top. And then, like I said, this is going to go in the oven at 350. They have it baking for an hour. I really like to set my timer for less time and check on it a little sooner. And that way I have, in case my oven is a little hot or maybe some of my ingredients don't look right, that I have some time to adjust. So, and this looks so much better than my first one. I'm really excited to try it. All right, so here, a little closer view is what it looks like now, and then we're gonna put that in the oven. I've got all my ingredients in front of me, except for here we are, the onions. All right, so I'm gonna get my burner on, and I am all set. All right, so today the first thing that's gonna go into our pot, I know it's a little hard to see, but I'll be doing that a lot. We're going to be putting the onions in there, In the recipe that is in our cookbook, they use either butter or you can also use vegetable oil. I'm going to actually be using pork fat. Basically, the biggest thing you want is something that isn't going to burn. I think butter is good and it tastes great, but something like an oil has a little bit more of a higher like burn. Like you won't burn something, you'll burn butter really easily. So higher cook temp is what oil has. So you want to throw in the onions first. I do want to just talk about when you're cutting an onion. So here I have, oops. So here I have this full onion. When you first get it, you're gonna wanna cut off the top there, and then you're gonna wanna halve it. The piece that you wanna make sure you don't cut off right away is going to be this root piece here. When you cut that, it's what makes you kind of wanna cry when you cut onions, but it holds everything together. So here I've still got that on. Now I'll actually peel it. So I'm going to take my peelings off here of this one I already had cut. All right. Get that off. So I'm left with this onion here. So once I'm cutting, the first step that you want to do is you're going to want to hold your knife correctly. So thumb and your pointer finger, looking at my screen so you guys can see, so your thumb and your pointer finger, and then you take this hand and you wrap that around. So that way you have full control of your knife, which I think is really important. Now, when you're cutting too, your hand, you don't want it to be like that, right? You want it to curl in. That way your knife is gonna hit your knuckles before it ever would cut something off, like your finger. So when you're cutting the onion, the first way you want to cut is, so you can see the core up top here. I'm going to do this. I'm kind of cutting it a little weird so you guys can see it, but you can see I'm just cutting straight down now. So that way you've got these cuts that way. Then the onion, if I get close enough, maybe you can kind of see, the onion also has this natural cuts, right? Because there's layers. So if it's a big onion, you might have to do a lot of these cuts, but I do like to just do one, kind of show you here. It's gonna be cut like this, but I gotta do it so my hand goes on top and my fingers go up so they stay safe. And then I go that way diagonally once. And then the rest of it is curling the fingers in, making sure I've got a good knife hold. And there is an easy diced onion. And then when you get to the end, kind of doing that. So that was my big onion show, but let's get the onion cooking. I do need to sweat those onions for just a couple minutes. Then I'm going to talk through the rest of my ingredients, and then I basically just add all of the ingredients into this pan and let them simmer, and then my ragu is pretty much set. So I've got the oil in the pan. You can probably hear that simmering onion. You get a little bit more. Oh, I guess I'm using pork fat, so got my fat in the pan. All right, so I'm gonna let those keep cooking for a little bit. The next thing that I'm going to add is going to be, I've minced garlic and jalapeno. The jalapeno is totally up to you as far as if you wanna have a little bit of spice or not, but I like a little bit of spice. So I've got the garlic and the jalapeno. Now, like when I was prepping for this, right, talking about mise en place and everything in place, the garlic that's in here, that's gonna burn, whereas an onion has lots of water in it, lots of liquid. So it takes a while for them to cook, and that's why you want them to go in first, so you can kind of cook out that liquid. And like I said, they're not gonna burn like garlic, which is it's more sticky and it's really dense. That you're gonna put in later. So I'm gonna give my onions a stir. Then the other big components of these recipe is going to be your meat. So I wanted to use chorizo, but I maybe thought I had the wrong meat in my meat drawer in my fridge. So I kind of innovated, and I think that's another really important thing to keep in mind with like meat sauces and things like that. It's totally up to your flavor. So I'm actually using, instead of the fresh sausage, the chorizo, I'm going to use just ground pork, but I'm also going to incorporate some andouille. And again, this is a meat sauce. When I say ragu, it's really just a tomato-based meat sauce. And then the other ingredients that I haven't mentioned yet are going to be Michigan beans. So I got these at the Marquette Food Co-op. A big thank you to them who's lending me the camera that's giving you that great overhead view tonight. But we've got black beans, which I got from the co-op. They're Michigan beans. And then the last ingredient, mine's a little bit different. Again, this is me adapting. But it's going to be, you can kind of see it's my tomato stock that I made. So they use either canned or their own version of like tomatoes from the season and then puree them. Mine's a little, like, you can kind of see the jiggle, it's a little liquidy. So they call for 3 cups. Because there's so much liquid in mine, I'm actually going to use a little less. So before we finish up this recipe, which is going to happen really fast and kind of be hard to hear once I get this going. So I just want to talk about how that baking recipe, it's really important to stick to the guidelines, right? And to make sure that when we bake, that is almost scientific. Whereas I love cooking on a burner, which is like saute or boiling noodles and things like that, because I feel like I have more control. And a recipe like this, you know, you can definitely make mistakes, but you also can learn from those mistakes. And sometimes those mistakes are really delicious. And as well as, like, if you really like garlic, add more garlic. If you don't like garlic or you don't like jalapeno, you don't have to include that. So going back to what I was talking about before, cooking's fun because it helps you understand what you like and what you don't like, and then you can make something that's delicious for you. So we've got all of these really great ingredients. I'm going to get them all close by because they're going to start going in here fast. And again, I need to adjust this camera before I bring you guys back in. All right, so let's check out my onions. So let's make sure you guys can see better. There we go. So if you check out the onions here, my pan's always that color on the bottom, so don't think that's quite me. But so you can see I'm starting to get a little bit of color. They're sweating out. So I feel like I'm ready to start adding the next pieces. So I'm going to add then the garlic and the jalapeno. Get every last morsel. Just this a little bit higher. There. And then I'm going to also add the fresh ground pork. Use my spoon. Kind of hear that sizzle starting to happen. So I'm going to kind of mix that all together so that we get it nice and even. As far as the different spices and things you use, I think that's totally can be up to what you have around the house. I'm going to use some oregano. I'm going to use some black pepper, and I'm going to use some paprika, as well as maybe a little bit of chili flake because I like a little bit of spice, even though there's jalapeno in there. And then we're going to add a little bit of, this is wild leek, but it's like an onion powder from a local producer. All right, so you can see, if I bring closer, that there's a little bit of color on the pork, but overall it's pretty much fully cooked. So now I'm going to add, this is the andouille. I'm going to add the black beans. Got a lot of black beans because I love them. And then I'm going to add my tomato puree. And I'm going to give this all a really good stir. And let me let you check it out. So now I'm going to let all of this, it's pretty thick, but when I let it settle, I can see just a little bit of liquid on the top. So I'm going to let this kind of simmer, and then I'm going to add my different spices. And then I think it's really important before you're finished, once it's fully cooked in the end there, once it's simmered for about 5 minutes, to taste it. Make sure that it tastes delicious, but do you need to add a little bit of salt? Do you need to add a little bit of pepper? If it needs, if it's too spicy, you can add a little bit of sweetness, that'll calm it down. If it's too sweet, you can add a little bit of salt or a little bit of sour. Sour could be just a little bit of vinegar. But we can always talk more about that, but about balancing flavors. But that's pretty much it. So I'm gonna let my mixture simmer here, add its spices, it'll be all set. My coffee cake should be ready in about 45 minutes or so, but I got my timer set for a little bit less than that so I can check ahead of time. And I'm gonna have apple coffee cake featuring local apples, local butter, local flour, all from the Upper Peninsula. As well as I'm gonna have a really great meat ragu that's made with some different local meat from Case Country Farm, as well as Seeds and Spores Farm, but you can get local pork from different places around here. And if you're looking to do that, you can check out the Find Food and Farms app through Taste the Local Difference, which we'll put that link in the chat. And then we're also going to put, there's this really great Facebook group in the Upper Peninsula, and it's called Shop UP Farm. So if you're like, I really want local pork for this recipe, and you're not sure where to get it, you can always ask on this Facebook group, and they will let you know. But I just want to thank you all so much for watching. I want to encourage, you know, if you're looking to kind of work with younger kids in the kitchen, I want to encourage you to start baking with them. I think it's really great to learn about organizing recipes and just getting comfortable with being in the kitchen. If you're someone who likes, if you're a kid that likes to cook more, I think thinking about something like these more advanced recipes, like making a meat sauce, is a really great way to go. And then also we'll be sharing, like I said, my adapted recipes with those adaptions. I've also kind of included what tasks might be great for younger kids or would be better for older kids. All right, folks, well, that's it. Thank you so much for joining. If you join us tomorrow, we're going to be focusing on root vegetables and roasted vegetables, and then we'll also be featuring a salad, which is going to be kohlrabi, apple, and carrot. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining, and we'll see you tomorrow.